this week I thought I'd do some work on the food forest. I started this probably about 6 months ago, something like that, and there was already a lot of trees here, so I just kind of cut back some of the brushy, scrubby kind of stuff that was here, and then I started planting into that. As you can see behind me, the land here is pretty steep. My initial thought was to cut in swales, you know, like a kind of, as people use in permaculture, so you've got your hill like that, you cut some of the earth here and you pile it up here, so instead of just coming down, it sort of, you know, the land then starts to go like this. And that holds water, and it also doubles up on your topsoil because you're taking it from this area, putting it into this area and then planting into that. That appealed to me. I thought that was a smart idea with the just using that topsoil. The issue here is the land's just too steep. I think anything more than about 18 degrees and you're going to be struggling, and this is more like 40 degrees, so there's not much chance of that. Instead, what I thought I'd do is I want to cut a pathway into the land just so it's easier to access. This pathway should act like a kind of mini swale, so it's not going to stop the water flowing down the hill, but it should just kind of slow it down a bit, and that should help feed the trees. Because it's quite steep here, I am going to need something to stop the soil eroding down the hill, so I'm just cutting down some of the dead trees, and I'll use those as a kind of terracing system. The tree behind me is about 80% dead. There's very little green left at the top now. It's fine where it is, it could stay there in theory. The problem is that some of those branches are pretty big. It doesn't look it from here because it's quite thin, but it's a really tall tree. They'll fall down at some point, and I don't really want them smashing the fruit trees that I'm about to put in, so I think I'm gonna cut it down. It's also really useful for firewood for me, and if I cut it down now, it'll be easy to drag it out. If I cut it down in a few years, it will potentially have rotted more, and it'll also be harder to get out if all the fruit trees have grown up. So yeah, gonna take it down. This is a really tall tree, but it's also very thin. I think I'm gonna cut a notch, but it's gonna have to be a pretty small notch, and then I'll just cut in, leave 10% of the tree as hingewood, and hopefully it will hinge from the tree. One of the issues with these trees is that they're really dry. And especially this, since it's sort of half dead, which means that I've not got a whole lot of experience of cutting down trees, and the fact that it's so dry, I'm not sure that that middle section is really going to kind of operate well as hingewood. So if I'm going to cut out a notch like that and say that's 30% of the tree, and then I cut in and then I leave 10%, ideally the tree should just fall, and that middle 10% should just work as a hinge, and it will help the direction of the tree fall. With this, I have a feeling that that wood might not operate very well as a hinge. It's very brittle. I think it might just sort of, well, smash. But what's working in my favour here is that the tree's already leaning downhill anyway, so it means that I can be uphill, which is safer, cut from here, and I think that whatever happens, the tree will go in that direction. I mean, you can see from here just how heavily it's leaning in that direction. I mean, there's a little bit of growing this way, but not very much, so it should go. I have a feeling it's going to fall really fast. It's not ideal, but I can't think of another way of doing it really. I've just got to get amongst it. In some ways that worked really well. The hinge worked, it went slowly-ish, and it went exactly where the notch was cut, and then it got hung up in a tree. I should have probably looked at this a bit more from back there and spent a bit longer on it, and maybe cut some of the trees that it was about to fall into before cutting that one. You live and learn, don't you? kind of annoying.
I spent ages mucking around with that hung up tree before finally getting back on with the pathway.
So I got a very rough path dug yesterday, and now I'm going to kind of plant into that area. I've got some really cool plants that I found from this beautiful little nursery up north. I've got a couple of bananas here. One of them's called Rajapuri, I think it is. Really small. It's only 6 foot tall, which is pretty unusual for a banana. I've also got a Goldfinger, which is, you know, standard size banana plant, but it produces a lot. This is a cherimoya, also called custard apple. I've got an inga bean down there. I think you can just about see that in shot. Inga bean is also called ice cream bean. I've never actually eaten it, and it just sounded very unusual, so I thought, got to get it. Another cool thing is this plant here, which is a Suriname cherry. Obviously cherries are not going to grow very well if you don't have a frost. We don't get one here, and so I thought a little tropical cherry might do okay. I've also got a small pineapple, a gold kiwi fruit, and then this is a naranjella, which I'd never even heard of. I read that it has this kind of combination of like lime and rhubarb flavour, which sounds quite interesting. I think naranjella means little orange, something like that. Ecuador, I think, yeah, so South American fruit. I think it comes from Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, those sorts of regions have them. I've never seen one in my life, and I thought, whenever I see anything that's really unusual, I'm compelled to buy it. So, let's get planting. We've got 2 bananas, so one of them's 6 foot, one of them will get massive.
What about just have one here and one at the other end?
Yeah. All right, I feel like we should plant the massive one here for some reason. Smells amazing, this stuff.
Does it?
Yeah. Nice one.
Describe that to me.
So if that goes there, and then we mound up a little, I think.
Oh, you mound up?
I think so, because it's all this nice soil, it seems a shame. But... yeah, once we mound all that shit back up. There we go. Yep, perfect. Just because it's a bit steep here, I'm just putting a kind of, it's not exactly a terrace, but just putting this log in just to hold some of the soil back. We get quite a lot of rain. I don't want all of this to disappear. Just watering these in a bit. This is really the last month you'd want to do this in New Zealand, where it's not that warm. If you live in a tropical climate, you can plant whenever you feel like it, but these don't really enjoy winter here much, so they need to go in autumn, and that gives them a few months just to settle in, get their roots in. And then in winter, they don't tend to do that much. They're just sort of surviving. But, hopefully these ones will be fine. Getting a bit hot for digging holes. I think I'll leave it there for now. I've still got a lot to do. I'm going to extend this pathway out, and I'll probably plant a few more if I can kind of cram them in. Keep checking back and we'll see how the food forest develops. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.